Welcome back to Investies. I'm your host, Linda Garcia. This week, I am actually in California. I am a keynote speaker at a financial literacy conference named Empower, sponsored by SCE Credit Union. I am so excited to connect with everyone that's going to be in attendance at this conference. It's going to be focused on financial literacy. I'm going to get to do the keynote speaking as well as hosting a breakout session. And I'm also going to get to sign some books. So I'm looking forward to connecting with you all. This week on Investies, we are going to be discussing custodial accounts. This is an episode that aired back in August, but it is definitely worth another listen. Before we get into that episode, I just want to thank our patrons for joining Patreon and, of course, supporting Investies podcast. A big shout out to Chabelita Guel and also Jackie. Thank you all so much for joining. We appreciate the support. If you want to join Patreon, head over to patreon.com/investies. The link is in our show notes. You get early access to our episodes every week, commercial free, as well as a shout out. And of course, you are supporting us in creating this content. Thank you all so much. I'll come back next week with original content. Investies, in this episode, we are not going to discuss news. Instead, we're going to talk about a topic that I feel is really important. One that I believe we should have more conversations about. In this episode, we are going to discuss custodial accounts. We are also going to discuss the emotions that come with opening up a custodial account. A custodial account is an account that an adult can open up for a child under the age of 18 or 21, depending on the state. The custodian of the account doesn't necessarily have to be a parent. It can be a tío or a tía. It could be godparents. It could even be close family friends. The owner of the account will always be the child. However, they cannot take full control of the account until they are 18 or 21 years of age, depending on the state that they live in. These are accounts where you can begin investing for the child. Any money that is contributed to this account is irreversible, meaning once you have purchased a security, for example, a stock, for the child in this account, you are not allowed to take the money back. Custodial accounts are powerful accounts for children to have. They get to learn the process of investing, and there's potential for them to understand the importance of a long time horizon. A long time horizon is when you make an investment and you keep that investment, giving it time to grow for 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, or forever, indefinitely, potentially transferring the investment to the next generation. In most cases, the longer we hold the investment, the bigger the return. You're able to open a custodial account as early as the day that your sobrinos, your sobrinas, your ahijados, or your children are born. Can you imagine being born an investor? The moment you have a social security number is the moment that a custodial account can be open. The account is managed by the custodian, and typically contributions come from the custodian. There is no limit to how many custodial accounts a child can have. Whoever is opening up the custodial account would need to be a trusted person, as they would be having access to personal information, including the social security number. In our In Luz We Trust community, we have several tíos and tías, and of course parents that have opened up these custodial accounts. And I love when they tell me the stories of how the kids have become invested in the process, and they can sense the ownership that they have already at such a young age. It's such a great way to normalize money conversations and conversations surrounding investing. You can explain to kids that through these accounts, they own shares of publicly traded companies. That's a pretty big freaking deal. Imagine walking through Disneyland and explaining to your child that they own a piece of that park. The inner dialogue that would open up for that child, the absence of limitations. Most especially since the majority of our lives we are consuming publicly traded companies. So the role modeling of becoming an owner and making the child an owner of a publicly traded company themselves helps them take onus and responsibility, as well as understanding how money is not just something that we use in exchange for consumption, but it is actually something that we can use as a tool to grow more money. So how do you get a custodial account? Let me break it down for you. You can open a custodial account with a trusted broker. The process is pretty much the same as opening your own brokerage account. The process of opening a brokerage account is something that I go over in my book, Wealth Warrior: 8 Steps for Communities of Color to Conquer the Stock Market. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, I'm going to talk to you about the emotions that this topic never fails to bring up. Investees, we launched a Patreon. Myself and Cosmic Standard, we are self-funding this project. We believe in disseminating this type of information. We believe in the knowledge and the education that this type of information can bring to our families and our communities. And so we have decided to self-fund. If you want to help us fund this project, head over to patreon.com/investees, where you can start contributing $3 a month. You'll receive benefits like receiving this podcast early and commercial free. And we're back. I taught Wealth Warrior this past weekend. One of my favorite things is getting to teach live. I haven't done this course in 2 years. It's a deep, intense course. There's a lot of emotions that come up in the course. Sometimes there's crying. There's definitely a lot of space holding, and it never fails. Every single time I teach this class, there is a concern, a red flag, emotion that is raised with custodial accounts. So much so that the topic is still consuming me. And I thought it important to open up the conversation here on the podcast and get real with you. It is a concern that every time I hear someone bring up, it causes a lot of, I think, pain for everyone, because it really opens up our hearts and shows us just how what are normal, everyday decisions in many white households can cause so much turmoil in our households. It's really painful. And to be honest, it also angers me. It really shows the impact of disparity, not just with numbers and with privilege, but with our thoughts and the ability or inability to make potentially positive and impactful decisions that can ultimately alter our entire life. Like, we are really out here afraid of our potential and who we can be without lack and scarcity. And before I get into this, I just want to say that every single time I give this course, one of the most important steps that I take when I first start teaching the class is to make sure that I am holding a safe space. It's astonishing to me how a set of definitions pertaining to the stock market can be extremely triggering. I think this is something that is not necessarily exclusive to marginalized communities, but it is amplified in marginalized communities, where I have to set up trigger warnings because we have not had access to all of these resources that when we begin learning them, it can feel extremely overwhelming and like a mountain that is impossible to climb. So it's always important for me to really create a safe space so that dialogue can take place and we can share our deepest fears and concerns as we're delving into the stock market. The conversations from class to class are almost always the same in terms of the concerns and the questions that come up. And the one that hurts the most is, if I open a custodial account, will this mean that the child will not qualify for financial aid? And the answer to that is possibly. But what I really want to say is hopefully there's enough money in there that they don't have to worry about financial aid. It reminds me of when I was a teen mom. I gave birth to my daughter at just 14 years old. I was on WIC, which stands for Women, Infants, and Children. It's a government program that provides mothers with eggs, milk, cheese, cereal, infant milk, which can be extremely costly. I really wanted to start working and making money. And one of my biggest fears, what I was contemplating, was if I get a job, then I will lose the access to the free resources that are really helping out my family right now. It caused me so much anxiety just thinking about what it would mean if I lost those resources. It's so easy to fall into the pattern of being solely dependent on resources outside of you for fear that it will never be something that you can provide for yourself. And I understand that. I get it. But that's not true. I have benefited from so many of those resources, so much so that I began to have this deep desire to one day become the resource. What would that look like? If I could give out money for scholarships, if I could become an angel investor, if I could become a venture capitalist. There came a point in my life where I understood that I needed to stop looking for a producer and I needed to start producing myself. That nobody was going to come and rescue me. I want us to understand that nobody is coming to save us. That who we are waiting for is ourselves. That money is powerful and it can be used as a weapon, but it can also be used as a tool. And that it's time for it to be in the hands of our people. Open the custodial account. It's the start of freedom and opportunity for the most important child in your life. You're listening to Investies. I'm your host, Linda Garcia. Investies is a Cosmic Standard and In Lose We Trust production. A special thank you to the team, Asia Simpson, Eliza Smith, and Jacob Winnick.